G'day, AJ Mahar here. A commenter asked on the video I did, Borderline Personality, the silent treatment, and the quiet borderline. Is ghosting an extreme form of silent treatment, or are they distinct behaviors with distinct motivations generally? So is ghosting an extreme form of silent treatment? Well, no, in BPD, not really. There's a lot of information out there now because people tend to say, many professionals tend to think that it's because of social media and the ways that people are communicating today through social media, like all those different ways, and maybe sometimes not so much in real life as well, unless and until you're in a relationship with someone. Ghosting has become something that isn't just a borderline thing.
And just before I get into this, if you enjoy my work or help by it, resonate with me, and you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe, hit that notification bell so you'll be notified of all uploads, and please remember to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow in the algorithm. So if the channel's helpful to you, maybe you'd like to hit that like button and subscribe to help the channel in the algorithm so more people like yourself can find this channel.
I've seen information out there that suggests that if you're in a relationship, you're dating someone, or you're in a relationship, but you're not like living together, whatever, then if the person doesn't respond to you, like a phone call, a couple of texts or something, if they don't respond generally within 3 days, says a psychologist out there, can't remember their name, not a YouTuber, and they say that if you don't get a response back from someone you're dating or a partner within 3 days, you should consider that ghosting. So that's people without BPD. That's just generally this cultural, newish way for people to, via social media and sometimes in real life, they just ghost. It's just like when people are not sure if a relationship's going to work out, or they're not into that person, and this is people without any personality disorder or anything, they just tend to ghost now as well. So something happening in culture that's broader than just narcissists and borderlines. But so with people with BPD, I think it's really important not to think about those 3 days. As a psychologist wrote in an article I read recently, but I don't remember where, sorry, that ghosting in general, in the general population, 3 days, and you can consider you've probably been ghosted. Can't do that with people with BPD. Why? Well, because they have many different patterns and their issues and how this plays out in people with BPD. So silent treatment, most often given by the quiet or discouraged borderline, but some perturbed, more acting out, classically angry, raging people with BPD can also ghost. So here's the thing that I recommend to clients and to people in general. If you haven't heard from that person with BPD for hours to a day, 3 days, don't go by the 3-day rule of the general applied to just average people out there. A week. So what you need to do is see if you can establish that there's a pattern to the person that you're with individually with BPD. So, or who you suspect has BPD. So don't look around online, well, she ghosted me after 3 days, or it was 5 days, or it was like 2 months. It's knowing the person that you're actually involved with or caring about, etc., that has BPD. What are their patterns? Because usually they have patterns. Whether you think it's silent treatment or whether it might be ghosting. Silent treatment isn't exactly the same as ghosting. Silent treatment usually is, and again, it might not be the same for all with BPD. It's usually shorter. It usually doesn't last as long as when they progress to ghosting. Now, what is the actual difference between the silent treatment and ghosting? Well, that's probably something that you can't well ascertain from your experience. But what I would suggest is internally inside of, especially the quiet borderline, that the difference is when you feel like you're getting the silent treatment. Some people with BPD do this in a punishing way, but often the person with BPD doesn't even know what's happening for you, which isn't ideal either. So when they withdraw into the self, well, lack of self, when they internalize and they withdraw. And that's, they're going into an avoidant phase, and it's a devaluation situation. When people, especially with quiet BPD, do this, they may not have any idea of how it affects you. They just are too internally trying to regulate their own emotions and deal with what's happening for them internally, which could be a wide range of different things. You experience it as a silent treatment. They may or may not realize that or be doing that with any conscious intent to hurt you. For the person with quiet BPD especially, that withdraws and internalizes everything, those times before they will come back as if nothing happened and taking no accountability or personal responsibility are usually shorter than when they ghost. The difference for people with BPD, quiet BPD especially internally, for them is that when they withdraw, it's about protecting themselves. It's about they're probably really triggered. They're in a really negative, bad place. They're devaluing you. And they're internalizing all of this. And it's just tumult and chaos inside. And they can't make any sense out of it. So they withdraw. And then you feel like you're getting the silent treatment. So I think both is true. And then the difference internally for especially the quiet borderline when they ghost, that's when they've now progressed further in to their emotional chaos and dysregulated emotions that are stronger now, and they're like, I can't do this anymore. And they're not sure why, and so it's a deeper kind of reaction of a stronger devaluation. So it is a bit different in how it comes about inside of people with BPD, and specifically quiet BPD. But having said that, you can't really know what's going on inside for the person with BPD that you're with. So look to the patterns. You know, if they are withdrawing, and or as you might put it, when they're giving you the silent treatment, how often has that been happening, and how long does that usually last? You know, because it could last 2 hours or 4 hours or half a day or a day. It's hard to say because everybody with BPD can manifest this in their own personal patterns. So then for ghosting, again, look to the pattern of the person with BPD you're with, or you were with, or who's your ex, or who's in any relationship type. Is their pattern usually like hours? Is it usually a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or a week? Or is it 2 weeks? Or can it be 3 weeks? Or can it be up to a month or 2? And you've been through this cycle a few times? Because you have to look at that. And then when will you know, or when should you really, if you don't want to just detach, get help. I'm out here to work with anybody that resonates with me on any of this, by the way. Then when they've gone, when you ascertain this pattern, which most people are aware of these patterns, of either the silent treatment or if you're ghosted, because they're not exactly the same. So once the person with BPD exceeds the length of the usual pattern that you may have experienced many times in, whether it's silent treatment and that gets elongated, but when the pattern is exceeded of time away, of not communicating with you, then you can start to believe, oh, this is likely now ghosting versus silent treatment. Because I've had so many clients describe this to me. They'll say, my borderline, or whoever it is in their life, has this pattern, and it's usually like no longer than 5 days. And now it's been like 2 months. Or a client of mine in the past would say something like, I'm just taking things, I'm not using specific things to specific clients. But I've had clients who said, her cycle of like ghosting could be silent treatment this long, or ghosting, it could be like 2 weeks, could be a month, could be 2 months, various different increments of time. And then often clients are reporting to me, and they book sessions with me because now, like, the patterns have been broken, and this person hasn't communicated, even if they've been reverse hoovered by you or like my clients. Then they will say, okay, now I really don't know what's going on because he or she has never gone this long without contact. So then you know that it's moving into ghosting or discard. And then the key thing about that is, of course, rather than stay involved with that, you need to think about how to help yourself. And especially if you've been through this more than once, or 5 times, or 10 times, or 20 times, because these relationships, and I say this generally, with untreated people with BPD and people that aren't really diagnosed, these relationships are not going to work out. They are not exactly two distinct behaviors. The silent treatment versus ghosting, especially in quiet borderlines, not necessarily behaviors at all, but defensive reaction to what's being experienced internally, which has all to do with devaluing you, whether it's a micro split to devaluation or a major split to devaluation. And silent treatment for people with BPD and what's happening for them internally that you could be confused about, you don't know what's going on, that's one thing. And ghosting is when their emotional dysregulation, their approach avoidance, they're getting into stronger avoidance, their devaluation, their need to protect themselves grows stronger. So then they're moving further away and out of the patterns of any kind of silent treatment prior. There is a difference, but it's not really just behavior, and it's not really two distinct behaviors, but it's different degrees of the same or similar response of what the person with BPD, especially the quiet borderline, is internalizing, re-experiencing from the past, probably unconsciously and not aware of that. They'll be attributing more and more of their discomfort and their distress as being your fault. And they're not realizing where it's really coming from inside of themselves. And then they start to move toward the ghost and discard because it's a stronger devaluation. So I would say that the silent treatment versus ghosting, especially with quiet borderlines, is kind of like a spectrum. So the silent treatment is one part aspect to a certain degree, and the ghosting is when the devaluation is stronger, there are chaos, internal tumult, and emotional dysregulation and agony, and they don't understand why they're feeling all that, is now stronger and is getting really ascribed to you because they're not consciously aware that what's triggering them and what they're feeling as a result of that is really from the past and isn't about you. I don't think ghosting is an extreme form of a silent treatment. Silent treatment is a silent treatment, and ghosting is moving beyond silent treatment.